in a quiet residential area of Greenwich, Connecticut. The morning mist lingered over neatly trimmed lawns, softening the outlines of the white picket fences and towering maples. From my bedroom window, I could see the dew shimmering on the grass like a blanket of tiny diamonds. 3 years had passed since my father's sudden death, yet every morning as I stood by that window with a cup of coffee in hand, the ache of his absence returned as vividly as the day we lost him. My father, William Wilson, had been more than just the head of our household. He was the anchor of our lives, a respected investment advisor. He spent long hours building a stable future for our family. I often remember the last dinner we shared together, steak sizzling on the grill, his favorite meal. That night, he had smiled across the table at me with tired but kind eyes and said, "Jen, I'm leaving the future in your hands." At the time, I had brushed it off as one of his casual remarks. I never imagined that within weeks, a sudden heart attack would take him from us forever. Since his passing, the balance of our family had shifted. As the eldest daughter, much of the responsibility fell on me. My role as a senior analyst at Morgan & Brooks provided a good salary, $150,000 a year, but it often felt like water leaking from a cracked jug. Mother's expenses for luxury clothes and extravagant church donations consumed a large portion of what I saved. My younger sister, Rachel, was no better. Her college tuition and taste for high-end fashion were constant financial drains. I remember her pleading eyes when she first showed me the acceptance letter to her dream design program. "Jen, this is what I've always wanted. Please, I know you'll help me." And, of course, I did. I always did. I paid her tuition, dipped into my own accounts, and reassured myself it was for the family, for her future. At the time, my boss had offered me a transfer to Manhattan, promising a much higher salary and more opportunities, but I turned it down. I told myself I needed to stay close to home, to keep our family together after Father's death. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if that was my first mistake, choosing family over myself. Rachel eventually graduated and took a job at Elegance, a chic apparel store on Greenwich Avenue, but her modest income barely covered her obsession with the latest handbags and dresses. Credit card debts piled up, and soon enough, she was back at my door. "I'll be careful from next month," she always said with a sheepish smile, yet I knew better. Her promises dissolved as quickly as they were spoken. Mother, meanwhile, immersed herself in church activities at First Presbyterian. On Sundays, she wore designer suits and carried luxury purses, insisting, "We must keep up appearances." Jennifer, the donations to the church, always higher each year, became another silent burden resting on my shoulders. And then, 3 months ago, Rachel announced her engagement. Her fiancé, Michael Thompson, owned a newly opened Italian restaurant on Greenwich Avenue. Local critics praised his talent, and Mother couldn't stop boasting. "He's a rare find, Jen, a young chef with ambition, refinement, and good taste." Rachel, too, was glowing with excitement. I tried to be happy for her, but a distance was growing between us. Then, one evening, she came to my apartment clutching a thick envelope. Her eyes sparkled with determination. "Jen, this is the most important day of my life. I want my wedding at First Presbyterian, followed by a reception at the Hyatt Regency. I want a Vera Wang dress, the best catering, everything perfect." When she showed me the estimate, my stomach twisted. It was astronomical. "You're the only one I can turn to," Mother added firmly. "This is what family does." I hesitated, but in the end, I sold Father's memorial stocks, $50,000 worth. I told myself it was an act of love, that he would have wanted Rachel to begin her married life surrounded by beauty and hope. I wanted to believe it was the right thing. But as the wedding preparations moved forward, I noticed Rachel and Mother contacting me only when money was involved. Invitations, dress fittings, catering deposits, every conversation circled back to finances. My sister, once cheerful and close to me, now treated me more like her banker. Still, I endured it silently. I convinced myself things would return to normal after the wedding. On the day of the ceremony, I awoke in darkness. My high-rise office on Greenwich Avenue demanded my attention earlier than usual. An urgent meeting with Asian market investors had been scheduled at 7 a.m. The timing was critical. "I'll be there for the ceremony," I assured Rachel the day before. "The church service is at 1 o'clock. The meeting should be finished by 10. But Rachel had frowned, her lips pressed tight. "You're prioritizing work over your sister's wedding. Unbelievable." The meeting began. Rows of serious faces appeared on the monitor from Shanghai, Taipei, and Hong Kong. Chinese tech stocks were plummeting, the red arrows flashing down the screen like falling daggers. Every word I spoke carried weight, millions of dollars were at stake. "Miss Wilson, what's your outlook on the Chinese market?" a client demanded. I answered carefully, my phone buzzing endlessly in my pocket. I knew it was Rachel. I didn't look. I couldn't. The meeting dragged on. By noon, I felt my chest tighten with panic. The church bells would soon be ringing, but I couldn't walk away. To leave would have meant betraying my professional duty. To stay meant betraying my family. I thought of Father. What would he have done? Finally, I steadied myself and said, "We must wait until the market stabilizes before adjusting strategy." The clients nodded, their trust in me visible. The decision saved the company millions. But when the meeting ended, it was past 2 o'clock. I rushed out, hailed a taxi, and prayed the traffic would part for me. My phone was filled with unread messages, angry, urgent, accusatory. By the time I reached the Hyatt Regency after 3, the reception was nearly over. The hall was half empty, confetti scattered across the carpet. I spotted Rachel in her wedding gown, radiant beside Michael, and Mother laughing with guests. Rachel turned to me, her eyes sharp. "Finally, we already cleared your seat." Mother swirled her wine glass and muttered, "To be late on such an important day." Guests chuckled around her. At my feet lay my crumpled place card, Jennifer Wilson, discarded and stepped on. I stood frozen in my navy suit, the weight of their disdain pressing into my chest. The $50,000, my sacrifice, my father's memory, it all meant nothing here. Without a word, I left. Through the grand lobby and into the cool evening air, I walked until the shadows of the buildings stretched over me. In the silence of my car, I finally cried. My phone buzzed again, Rachel's name lit the screen. I pressed reject. The next morning, light streamed into my apartment. For a moment, I wished it had all been a nightmare. But reality stared back at me from my phone. 52 missed calls. Rachel, Mother, and even relatives. Their messages weren't apologies. They were accusations. "You ruined the wedding. You embarrassed us." Mother's messages hurt the most. "What will people at church think? Jennifer? How could you do this to us?" I brewed coffee slowly, the bitterness matching the taste in my mouth, and as I stood by the window overlooking Greenwich Avenue, I realized something with chilling clarity. Yesterday hadn't just been about a wedding. It was the moment I lost my place in the family I had sacrificed everything for. I turned on my computer, the soft hum filling the silence of my apartment. The glow of the screen illuminated my desk as I began organizing the evidence I had quietly gathered. First came the printouts, 3 months of bank statements, each page marked with the familiar transfers. I pulled out the record of the $50,000 given to my sister for the wedding. Then the transaction slips from selling Father's memorial stocks, the last pieces of his legacy that I had surrendered. Each page I handled with meticulous care, scanning and saving them into a folder labeled not with emotion, but with the cold clarity of numbers. Repayment evidence. As the printer whirred, I sat straighter. I wasn't just a daughter or a sister anymore, I was an analyst, preparing for a case as if it were one of my high-stakes investment projects. Next, I opened the website of Harrison and Partners law firm on Greenwich Avenue. My fingers hovered for a moment before I began typing, filling out the appointment form. Harrison had once been a close friend of my father's, someone who had stood by our family during better days. My hand was surprisingly steady, my pulse calm, as if my body already knew that this was the right path. The phone call followed. "Thank you for your call, Miss Wilson." Attorney James Harrison's voice carried the same warmth I remembered from my childhood. "When he used to visit our home for dinner, I had a long relationship with your father," he said gently, before giving me precise advice. A certified demand letter would be the appropriate first step. His words were not an attack, not even a judgment. They were practical, methodical, businesslike. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. This wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about order, about respect for what had been lost. "There are sufficient legal grounds for the repayment demand," Harrison continued, his voice firm but not unkind. "However, since this is a family matter, We should leave room for discussion first. That suggestion was thoughtful, befitting a man who had known my father's values. That afternoon, I sat at my office desk reviewing the draft of the certified letter. The language was deliberately simple, avoiding complicated legal jargon, yet each word was chosen with precision, each sentence leaving no room for misunderstanding. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. When I sealed the envelope and wrote Rachel's address in careful strokes, I paused. Would this letter mark the beginning of a new relationship with my family, built on honesty and accountability? Or would it be the beginning of the end, severing ties that had already been stretched too thin? On the way back from the post office, I stopped by the supermarket. Around me, housewives filled their carts with weekend groceries, children tugging at their sleeves. It felt like a scene from another world, one that no longer belonged to me. At the checkout, I noticed the corner of a wedding invitation peeking from my wallet. The gold lettering on luxury paper, once so elegant, now seemed bitterly ironic. Back at my apartment, my phone lit up with a new call. It was from the real estate agent handling Rachel and Michael's apartment purchase. I just need confirmation about the guarantor details. The words hit me like a second wave of cold water. Of course, I hadn't only paid for the wedding, I had signed as their guarantor too. That evening, I poured a glass of wine and stood by the window, the city lights of Greenwich Avenue flickering to life below. My phone buzzed again, a message from Mother. I didn't even open it. My decision was made. This wasn't about emotions anymore. As Father had always taught me, investments carry risk, and proper planning is the only shield against loss. That night, I opened Instagram. My sister's page glowed with wedding photos, Rachel glowing in her dress, Michael lifting a glass in celebration, smiles frozen in frames of luxury. I quietly locked my phone and set it aside. Tomorrow was Monday. Work awaited at Morgan & Brooks. Clients, cases, and investments didn't pause for family drama. Neither would I. Still, before I fell asleep, I looked at Father's photograph on my nightstand. His gentle smile seemed to reassure me. Dad, I whispered, I'm not wrong, am I? The photo, of course, remained silent, but something in his gaze steadied me. Days later, the intercom in my apartment buzzed. On the screen appeared my mother, Rachel, and Michael. I hesitated, but finally pressed the button to unlock the door. In my living room, with the city skyline behind me, we sat across from one another like adversaries in a negotiation. Why are you doing this? Mother asked first, her voice softer than usual. Her designer suit couldn't mask the unease in her posture. Everyone at church is gossiping about us. Rachel, usually arrogant, avoided my eyes. We're family, aren't we? Why bring lawyers into this? Michael sat beside her, silent but tense. I placed the documents on the coffee table between us, bank statements, wedding receipts, guarantor contracts. These were investments made out of goodwill, I said firmly. Mother opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. I'm not finished. From my desk, I retrieved the repayment plan drafted by Harrison & Partners, $500 per month, with late fees if payments were missed. This is far more generous than any bank would offer you, I told them. Rachel's voice shook. But our restaurant isn't even stable yet. Michael finally spoke. I'll take responsibility, he said quietly, determination in his tone. Show results first, I replied, then we'll talk about flexibility. The silence stretched heavy until Rachel reluctantly signed the papers. Is this the end of our relationship? Mother whispered. I looked at her calmly. No, it's the beginning of a new one. The next day, at the notary office, the contract was finalized. That evening, Rachel sent me a short message. Jen, I promise I'll pay it back. I read it, then put my phone away without answering. Life began to move forward. Years passed. Greenwich Avenue changed. Buildings rose. Shops closed. But the church spire still stood tall, unchanged. My own life transformed too. I became a partner at Morgan & Brooks. Recognized as one of the youngest influential analysts in the country, I mentored young women in finance, teaching them the importance of boundaries and independence. Rachel's life took another path. The Italian restaurant failed within a year. Michael found work at a small pizza shop in New Haven. Rachel's luxury lifestyle faded into second-hand sales and quiet humility. Yet, every month without fail, the repayment appeared in my account, a small but steady reminder that our family bond now existed in contracts and numbers. Mother, too, changed. She no longer flaunted donations at church, no longer cared about appearances. Her calls now carried no demands, only simple, human words, and strangely, I began to welcome them. One spring afternoon, I laid flowers at Father's grave. His name glistened under the sun, and I found myself smiling softly. I realized then that the wound had healed. What remained was strength to live on my own terms, without apology. That evening, standing by my apartment window with a glass of Chardonnay, I whispered into the twilight, life doesn't always go as planned, but finding your own path within it, that's true strength. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace.